We were always associated with heavy, progressive group and all that, but we came into the business writing pop songs, and it's something we'd always loved. And we were really pleased we'd actually written one that we thought was pretty good. And probably would have been quite a big hit if it hadn't sort of had this wardrobe in the title, which no one can understand. It was just a really nice sort of effect. It just developed very well, chorus very strong. And there's some other songs on this which were not quite as... I probably don't have quite so much time for this album as the previous one, purely because I'm not quite so fond of some of the things. After the Ordeal was the track I really don't like. I never liked it. And I would have liked it not to have been on the album, but it was sort of, in the end, we compromised by putting everything we had on. And there's Dancing with Moonlit Night, which I like. I like the way it starts very much, but it's not my favourite song, although I know a lot of people like it very much, but it's a slightly weaker track for me.
For her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
Dancing with the Moonlit Night was this attempt to sort of mix some traditional folk elements with more contemporary band arrangements, and I think even in the colour of the voice I was using at the time, it was folk influence.
I think Dancing with the Moonlit Night has got a lot of great moments on it. And when it starts out, you really don't know where the song's going to go, do you? And there was this da-da-da-da-dum-bum-bum-bum, which Pete wrote on piano, and mainly becomes a guitar figure throughout the song. Again, it's someone else's melody interpreted on guitar in two different ways. And there's that lovely bit at the end that we used to call Disney, which they started using for some reason on gardening programs these days. Shot of a gnome, and there's this tinkling 12 string saying, that's Mike's bit there, this sort of repeated chord pattern. But we all operated with rock instruments, but not like a rock group. We all sort of faded ourselves in very, very gently, and we're all being very pastoral.
Yeah, I think there was a growing sense of confidence, and also with that particular track, which I started off writing, I was trying to get a folk reference and sort of, if you like, protect and preserve some of the Englishness. So it was in the opening part particularly trying to capture something that was had more references to Henry VIII than it did to American soul music. And then with the lyric, it was in a sense about the commercialization of English culture.
Firth of Fifth was one of those things where Tony just sort of, we'd all get together to play each other our bits, of which he had hundreds, and Mike had quite a few, and Peter had a few, and we'd be steamrolling into playing Firth of Fifth.
Firth of Fifth was, obviously it's a kind of like a very strong sort of keyboard moment from the early years, and the way the guitar solo evolved is quite interesting, really, because I'd written, the three bits, and the second bit I'd written was just really a flute and piano melody, and I'd just seen it as that. And we were playing it, we played it a few times, it sounded really nice. And then one time Steve said, started playing it, and he started playing it sort of like this, and I thought, oh, great, and I started to put the mellotron in big chords like this. And it was almost like a joke. We were kind of doing it sort of like a la King Crimson, is how we saw it. I was just doing this overblown thing. I thought, actually, that's really good, this. So we then sort of, so for the reprise of that melody, when it came in the second half of the song, we said, well, let's do it this big way and see how it works. And it worked really well. And it gave a chance for Steve to actually do a sort of proper guitar solo.
Tony's melody, which I tried to interpret in a kind of slightly sort of Middle Eastern sort of way. I was bending all the notes, and I remember one or two people said, "Oh, it sounds a little bit Indian, almost like a sitar," and there was a note that I was able to sustain that would work 9 times out of 10 at the top you do a high F sharp, and just with proximity to the speaker cabinets, it fed back. So it sounded like I had perfect sustain on every note. I didn't, but I was able to fade in the notes on the beginning of it and sort of wait for it, coast over a sort of atmospheric section, and then play this melody, which I think, although it was written as a piano melody originally, it became a flute melody, and then it became this guitar melody, and it's kind of become Genesis' most well-known guitar solo. So yeah, I was allowed to play forever, it seems, this great long guitar solo in the middle of something written by Tony.
Steve, I think, was starting to really sort of find his feet a bit more on as a player live and everything. I mean, obviously he always contributed, a lot of Genesis music obviously required sort of guitar, sort of acoustic guitar picking and stuff, where people notice it less, I think. People tend to notice lead playing a little bit more, and I suppose on this it was more of a genuine guitar solo. Some of the others are a bit tricksy, he's kind of thinking very hard about every note he played, and so it doesn't sort of soar in quite the way that this does, where I think he allowed himself to actually have a bit more freedom, with it. Particularly before the main melody starts, just some very nice little phrases and stuff, so it sounds more like a real guitarist.
Once again, it's a nice section. It's about more space. We're taking the main theme from the song and just letting it run for about 4 minutes with a lovely guitar solo playing the melody and some lines in between. So we're starting to give sections more space and more time to sit in one mood rather than move on too fast.
Steve definitely, I think, gained in confidence, and Firth of Fifth is very much a Tony piece in terms of its how it started and how it built. But Steve did let loose in, I think, probably the best way up to that point at the end.
Along the forest road, there's hundreds of cars, luxury cars. Each has got its load of convertible bars, cutlery cars, superstars.
Battle of Epping Forest is a classic example of what I was getting at with Can Utility and Get 'Em Out by Friday, where we had very well recorded as well. I mean, I remember, I can picture this, we were writing it, and we had some really good counter polyrhythmic bits happening, And then Peter took the song and wrote the lyric, and we recorded the track, and then he came in to sing the lyric, and we were just like, it's like 300 words a line, it was like there was no space, any air had been sucked out of it. And not to say that, he was in the wrong or we were in the wrong. It's just that if we'd have only known, we could have thinned it out. And in those days, we didn't go back and re-record things, This is it. We've got our version. We have to make do, I mean, it's incredible to think about, isn't it, really? But, so we did play it live, but it was always a little bit... It was always like a barrage of information, sort of being thrown at you. So that was the classic example of when that stuff really got a little bit out of hand.
Coming over the hill, the boys are building, Johnny's legs stand very still.
It's probably too busy, I'd spend a lot of time, building up this story with all these characters and setting scenes, and was quite reluctant to edit as severely as I should have done. So I think it did end up too wordy.
They called me the Reverend when I entered the church on stage.
Even at its weakest, Selling England by the Pound has got great moments on it. Great moments, great humour. Very funny bit in the middle of Epping Forest, Pete doing the vicar. Just brilliant.
Home from work, our Juliet clears her morning meal.
The other song on this album, I suppose, that kind of was a big development for us again was the Cinema Show, which was another one of those things that starts off with a sort of quiet, acoustic beginning and then ends up doing something else at the end. But I think the instrumental at the end of this was probably the best of the ones we did at this stage in our careers anyhow. Mike had this riff, which was just in 7, just going dang, 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 like that. And he was playing along, And I'd sort of just started fiddling around on top of it, and then we thought this could be really good. So again, Steve, Phil, Mike, and I just went off really and put this all together, and worked on all these bits. And I just improvised for hours and got the little bits and pieces going. Then Mike would change the chords, and we ended up with this piece. And I think it's it's such a strong rhythm in the first place. A lot of the things you play on it could be really good, but I got one or two quite good melodies on top of it, and it again built up to a very nice sort of climax, I think, and probably better on stage than it was on the album in many ways. But on the album, it sort of fades out into the next bit, which I'm not too sure is quite so good. But it was an exciting thing to have created at the time. I think we were very pleased with it.
The Cinema Show was lyrically, I think, Tony and Peter. I think. Either Tony and Peter or Mike and Peter. But anyway, and the end, of course, was just based on a guitar riff, a 7/8 drum riff. And then Tony just sort of had lots of bits on top, and eventually that became the themes, which are very strong themes.
I think I was influenced, my playing on that, and there's not that much electric playing of mine. I was influenced by the flute work of Ian MacDonald working with King Crimson, so I tried to play very pastoral phrases. I developed it a bit more when we did it live, doing percussion noises and what have you. But in some ways it typifies the Genesis sound, because you've got almost a plethora of 12 strings going. Sometimes 2 12 strings, sometimes 3, and an electric 6 string as well. And this jangly sound where you can't tell, it sounds almost, is that a keyboard? Is that a guitar? What is that sound?
The first part's again another example of when I tuned my 12 strings. And normally you have got 12 strings and they're paired up, and you tune each pair to the same note. I started tuning each pair to harmony notes, which is how the song starts, with that sort of rundown. Now, what the hell the tuning is, I haven't got a clue, because the other day in New York we said, well, they were saying, let's do the first half of Cinema Show maybe, And I said, well, all right, but I had no idea how I played it, we'd have to work a compromised version out. But the second part, once again, seems to be, we started this move really, I think, with myself, Phil and Tony. And what I was doing, Steve, it's more about myself, Phil and Tony, playing, jamming and getting these instrumental moments, like the back end of the 9/8 in So I Was Ready, this one, which became a large part of our sort of our trademark really. And it was the instrumental part was a huge sort of crowd pleaser. Great live song.